The First Army, the Anvil. The Anvil, or the First Army, is called upon for protracted engagements and has been trained and conditioned for stamina. In theory, the Anvil is sent forward to engage and tie the enemy's forces up across large territories, positioning them for the hammer to strike with a full strength from the flank. The Anvil's tactics are designed to maximize resiliency by constantly cycling between active and reserve forces and taking the time to recover from casualties. Its officers consider themselves the KHADORAN military's foremost experts on conducting extended sieges. It also serves as an active reserve when veteran soldiers can be rotated off the field of the front line to recuperate while remaining close to the battlefield. This is the army that has been relied upon before all others in order to hold conquered territories and to assimilate them into the empire. Although it has played a major offensive role in the conquest of Lyell, the First Army has since been battling resistance elements and quashing insurgency. None of these soldiers take the occupation of Lyell for granted, as they have been able to endure many unexpected ambushes and sometimes surprisingly well-organized attacks from rebel forces. This is a role to which the First Army was not particularly well suited, although its officers have learned many hard lessons in the last several years and have begun to make headway in pacifying Lyell. Increasingly, Lysian cities have become more productive sources of artillery and KHADORAN industry, a fact that the First Army views as no small measure of pride. While most Lysian citizens still refer to themselves as such, there is less resistance in cities like Meerwin and Ladre to the idea of their efforts are strengthening the KHADORAN Empire. As most livelihoods have been preserved and daily life is largely unchanged, these citizens have begun to accept that the life is not so different under KHADORAN control as when Lyell was an independent kingdom. Despite these encouraging signs, the recent drastic reduction of the number of soldiers allocated to garrison Lyell is a concern to the officers of the 2nd Division, led by Commandant Kimilovich. In the air, there is a reason to expect that the withdrawal of KHADORAN troops may encourage Eastern rebels to renew their attacks. Added to this has been hostile actions by other powers, including the Protectorate of Menov, as well as recent unexpected and inexplicable attacks by Iosan soldiers. The possibility of additional clashes with the Protectorate seems inevitable, as the nation's Northern Crusade has turned the fortified city of Leirin into its new base of operations. A major confrontation between the Northern Crusade and the 2nd Division is considered an almost foregone conclusion, an eventuality that its soldiers have been training for tirelessly. After the fall of Northgard, a significant portion of the occupying battalions were sent south to take up positions in the northern Thornwood, maintaining KHADORAN interests in the area that had fallen primarily to the 1st Division of the First Army, led by Commandant Ivan Ilevich. This has necessitated a significant shift in tactics, as this division was previously patrolling southern Lyell, a relatively open and pastoral region. Operations in the Thornwood are complicated by a number of factors, including inadequate or erroneous maps, a general lack of clear land for barracks, and constant ambushes along KHADORAN supply lines. Morale in this division has plummeted, although the recent establishment of several sizable and fortified supply bases has helped provide a better sense of security for these battalions. The First Army is nominally commanded by Supreme Commandant Ivan Karzanovich of the High Command, but its operation direction is left in the hands of Commandant Mikhail Idanovich, who controls the army from Meerwin. Commander Idovanich is a humble and quiet officer with an engineering background who has achieved a strong reputation and who has faith and support of his men. Ivanovich was credited by Idrisk as being instrumental with the swift and successful invasion of Lael, as his oversight of army supply lines during the rapid invasion were critical. Despite recent problems in the Thornwood, it is generally believed that if any of the men can tame the forest to ensure Khador's ammunition and food reaches soldiers at the front line, it would be Ivanovich. He has also gained some measure of popularity amongst the Merowyn local population for successfully restoring industry and commerce to that city, as well as repairing most of the damage inflicted during the lengthy siege. This included the restoration of sites of historical significance, which the locals have taken as a sign of mutual respect. The Second Army, the Hammer. The Hammer, or Second Army, focuses on crushing offenses and therefore includes the largest number of assault legions, warjacks, and heavy armor infantry, although each legion still relies heavily on basic infantry battalions of Winter Guard. During the invasion of Lael, it was the Hammer that instituted lightning attacks against the Red Wall Fortress, Eisenberg, and Lydrel. It was this army that had been at the forefront of all major operations against Signar, including numerous attacks along the northern border and more recently toppling Northgard and subsequently pushing Signaran forces back to the Dragon's Tongue River. For these reasons, this is currently the most esteemed of Khador's army. Although Supreme Commandant Idrisk is in command of all three of Khador's armies, he is most strongly associated with the 2nd, and in particular the 4th Assault Legion of the 3rd Division. The soldiers, having fought under Idrisk longer than any others, and frequently serve as his vanguard. This and other assault legions specialized in making swift and decisive attacks, seeking to penetrate and destroy fortifications outright rather than by besieging them. Such tactics are not always appropriate, but Idrisk has carved the various elements of this army into a decisive set of finely sharp tools, each with its proper application. Because of this role at the forefront of Khadoran assaults, it is no surprise that the Second Army has suffered the highest casualties and includes the greatest degree of turnover for both officers and enlisted men. The army suffered during the first assault on Northgard, and its subsequent victory came at a high cost. Fresh recruits are constantly flowing into the various depleted companies and battalions, and Idrisk has implemented a highly successful methodology of ensuring new recruits are placed with seasoned veterans to learn their deadly trade. The Hammer has increased substantially in size and in recent months, both from freshly conscripted Winter Guard and by reallocating veterans who were once part of other forces. Presently stationed within the Thornwood, the Second Army is at a precarious situation due to the lack of an established support infrastructure. It has positioned itself to stand as a counter to Signaran forces on the other side of the Dragon's Tongue River, but practical considerations have made this difficult to implement. Construction of fortresses has been proceeding as quickly as possible, but none of these structures have yet been completed, and supply lines remained uneven. The enemy has the advantage of major cities such as Port Bourne and Corvus to support its own forces, putting the Hammer at a distinct tactical disadvantage. Much of the Second Army has been making do with woefully inadequate facilities and sporadic resupply. The men are hungry, they sleep in leaking tents, and they sufficiently lack ammunition for the blunderbusses and rifles they wield. Fewer soldiers man each of the unfinished fortresses is considered acceptable, inviting Signaran reprisals. The army has had a difficult time patrolling the forests, and thus interpretations of its lines by Signar Rangers has been unavoidable. As a result, the Second Army has been unable to react quickly to Signaran raids or launch operations against enemy positions. Overcoming these hardships is the chief concern of the Army's command, upon which there is considerable pressure to swiftly remedy the situation. For the moment, the Second Army relies upon the efforts of its exceptional warcasters to make up for the difference in manpower between the forces, drawing from the expertise of individuals like Forward Commander Kartakov, Commander Karchev, and Commander Strakov. The Second Army is the purview of Supreme Commander Alexander Guchikov, at the high command, but his influence on the army is almost inconsequential due to the proximity and active involvement of Supreme Commandant Irusk. Rumors suggest considerable tension between the two, as the former has accused the latter of insufficient efforts to expedite delivery of raw materials for fortress completion. Irusk has a far better working relationship with Commandant Boris Makarov, the field commander of the army. Makarov is a huge man with unapologetically enormous appetites, a seasoned former of Iron Fang who remained away from his army in the capital for some years until the birth of his son. Liberated from the fear of dying without a male heir, he rejoined the Hammer with renewed enthusiasm and seems determined to now face death fighting alongside, side by side, with Irusk. Perhaps because of the fighting reputation of this army, both of its divisions are nominally led by great princes who have been bestowed the rank of commandant by Emperor Svernar. Commandant and Great Prince Yoram Holochevsky leads the 3rd Division, stationed in the southwestern Thornwood to confront Port Bourne. Commandant and Great Prince Sergei Marvov leads the 4th Division, stationed in the southeastern Thornwood to counter Corvus. While having these great princes attached affords these divisions a certain level of prestige and pride, the actual presence of these men are rare. Their political stations have kept them more often in the capital or governing their respective Volskaya in KHADORAN. The commanding officers consider this for the best, as in the past the elevated political rank of these nobles has caused confusion in the chain of command. In their absence, details of managing the divisions are left to several capable commanders who have solid rapport with both Makarov and Irusk, respectively. The 3rd Army, the Forge. The 3rd Army is responsible for training and arming new conscripts, as well as maintaining garrisons in KHADORAN cities. The 5 border legions spread along the length of KHADORA's premier fall under the 3rd Army's purview. There are numerous training facilities under this banner, but the city of Volograd is the only center where this entire city is dedicated to military preparedness. The presence of the border legions in the 3rd Army makes it structurally very different from the other armies. The 3rd has the dubious distinction of boasting the largest separation between far-flung personnel, as there are soldiers wearing 3rd Army units markings as far northwest as Oldenfrost and as far south as the Dragon's Tongue River, more than 600 miles away. Garrison duty in KHADORA's interior is considered the easiest and least dangerous position in the KHADORAN army. These posts bestow little prestige or honor, yet are highly desired by those with strong family ties, such as young fathers. Recent years, however, have seen a number of unexpected threats to the KHADORAN interior, making the defense of KHADOR cities both more vital and more dangerous than before. One of those dread threats is the horror of rampant dragon spawn and their blighted minions. The High Command thought through the Grey Lord Coven still lacks for an adequate intelligence on this menace. Only a few northern and eastern towns have been plagued by these creatures, but rumors of the bloodshed have ensued have ensued, having spread throughout the entire empire. Other more sporadic internal threats include attacks by other hostile factions, including Trokan Kriels, particularly in the northwest, or groups led by the enigmatic black-clad druids. These attacks are primarily limited to remote regions, but remain a factor the High Command must consider when allocating its garrison forces. In addition to protecting its citizens, the 3rd Army must preserve vital industries like KHADOR's logging and mining companies. One rumor the High Command and the Pikrasi Chancellery have gone to great lengths to quash is the hostile elements from the elven nation of Ios that have recently struck inside of KHADOR's interior. The basis for this rumor is an alleged attack by Iosan military forces against a Grey Lord Coven underground base near Fort Brunzig. Exactly why this base would have been targeted and how the Iosians could have managed to penetrate so deeply into the border have not been explained. Most officers dismiss this rumored incident as a fabrication designed to incite panic and doubt. Commandant Kosten Zukovi, who commands the 5th Division and thus all border legions, is the man held responsible for the safety of the KHADORAN interior and the integrity of its borders. This has historically been a relatively safe responsibility, as no foreign power has ever successfully invaded KHADORAN soil. Nonetheless, recent turmoil has challenged this division as never before. The Third Army is under the supervision of Supreme Commandant Menshky Sergeyevich at the High Command, with Field Command being held by Great Prince and Commandant Karl Zetveit. The larger 6th Division, which is held responsible for training in its reserves, is commanded by Commandant Greko Antonovich. The actual involvement of Great Prince Zetveit is limited, as he leaves most matters to the distinction of Zhukovov and Antonovich. The higher officers of the Third have focused primarily on training and supply side of the reserves, along with the proper allocation of their home garrisons. Historically, the commanders of each of the border legions have been given autonomy giving more autonomy than any other legion in the KHADORAN army. The most active soldiers in the Third Army are those serving under the 1st and 5th Border Legions. Until the fall of Northgard, the 1st Border Legion was headquartered in Ravensgard. Most 1st Border Legion companies have marched alongside the 2nd Army deep into the Thornwood to integrate their operations with Irisk's other assets near Corvus. The much more esteemed 5th Border Legion has earned its fame since the First Thornwood War as a fighting force that has never given up the battle against Signar, even in times of great apparent peace. They have recently been sent south to maintain their aggressive stance against their traditional enemy and stand ready for the call of war in the western Thornwood near Port Bourne. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Border Legions are considerably smaller and less distinguished than either the 1st or the 5th. They are assigned to watch the less active borders with Rule, Ord's eastern border, and Ord's northern border, respectively. These legions are sometimes utilized to bolster internal garrisons. The 3rd has somewhat of an ominous reputation, and is rumored to be affiliated with Zavana Agna, the old witch of KHADOR. This legion has come to greater prominence in recent years due to its efforts to battle the internal threats plaguing KHADORAN's towns in the remote region. The presence of the 3rd Border Legion forces in unexpected places has become synonymous with disaster, but they are still welcomed by citizens eager for any army support against hostile wilderness enemies. Addendum: the 111th Infantry Battalion, the unbreakable 111th, 1st Border Legion, 13th Command, 5th Division, 3rd Army. Fight to the last man! Leadership: Kovnik Yosef Grigorovich. Captains: Arfano, Furdovich, Gervanov, Lasarovich, Lukervin, Petrovich, Tolvesky, and Yurikonovo. Assets: 2,000 Winter Guard infantry, 500 Winter Guard riflemen, 300 assault commandos, 60 rocketeers, 10 field guns, 30 mortar crews, 4 destroyers, and 1 devastator. There are certain combat groups in the KHADORAN army held into higher standard and considerable embellishment of the entire service. The unbreakable 111th Infantry Battalion is one of those groups. It was the first choice of every Winter Guard who finishes training at the KHADORAN Military Academy in Volgograd. The fact the battalion has high casualty rates is not seen as a problem for fresh recruits, but as proof that the 111th is guaranteed to see battle. The 111th Infantry is a central part of the 1st Border Legion and provides a backbone of veteran infantry support to 1 mobile and 3 mixed battalions that make up the rest of the Legion. With the legendary 5th, it is the only other border force regularly involved in ongoing fierce fighting. For most of its history, the 111th has been stationed at the fortress of Ravensgard, where its soldiers battled against the Signarin counterparts at Northgard. The roots of the 111th began in the founding of Ravensguard, completed in 286, after the Colossal War, and greatly expanded after Northgard was erected in 326. The soldiers of the 111th were not yet called Winter Guard in those times, but they displayed the same insignia that has come to be utilized and adapted by many other Winter Guard battalions and companies. Their motto, "Fight to the last man," was adopted after the battalion was twice near annihilated and yet refused to rout. One of these famous battles came during the Thornwood War of 511, when the 111th fought to intercept reinforcements that would have been sent against their kinsmen trapped against the Dragon's Tongue River. The 111th held down a Signarin force sent from Northgard to cut down the retreating KHADORANs. KHADORAN scholars speculate that without that sacrifice of the 111th, this force would have intercepted the 5th Border Legion and prevented them from earning their fame in the following decades. Adding to the prestige of the 111th Infantry is the reputation of its current commanding Kovnik, Yosef Grigorovich. Like most veteran Winter Guard, Grigorovich has served in many units and forces, but he came to the 111th in 393 as a captain and has since refused to budge, even if when offered a promotion elsewhere. He took over the battalion as Kovnik in 598 AR. And quickly earned the love and admiration of his men. After Grigorovich proved his worth in grim fighting around Ravensguard in 605, Supreme Commandant Alex Gurchikov of the 2nd Army offered him a promotion to full commander, hoping to make use of his services elsewhere. Grigorovich flatly refused. He said he aspired to nothing more than continued fighting in the trenches alongside his men. The 111th was directly involved in the recent attacks against Northgard, sending forces to confront the deeply entrenched Signarin infantry in their convoluted network of perimeter defenses. The indomitable battalion once again endured heavy casualties, but succeeded in maintaining pressure on the defenders while Supreme Commandant Irisk's assault legions advanced to the central fortress. Since the fall of Northgard, the 111th have followed the rest of the 1st Border Legion to march south from Ravensguard for the first time in decades. They are stationed among the 2nd Army battalions northwest of Corvus, where they are enduring extremely difficult conditions without a single word of complaint.